This is the best hybrid body under $1,000. The Fujifilm X-T3 is an $800 mirrorless camera that was released back in 2018, but still holds up going into 2026. So let's talk about it. Now, just to get the specs out of the way, this has a 26 megapixel sensor that is an APS-C, not full frame, but it does shoot 4K up to 60 FPS. If you want to do 120, has a slight crop up to 1080p, but it does have 10-bit 422 colors up to 400 megabits per second. It does have a 30-minute recording time and a 23 millisecond readout speed, if I believe that correctly. But my favorite part is the fine-tune adjustment over the shutter speeds. A lot of cameras overlook this nowadays, and nothing I hate more than shooting 23.9 and then having to use 1/50th. It's bad. And yes, it is noticeable. Now, just for context, this camera released for $1,500 back in 2018. And only 2 years later, the X-T4 came out, only adding IBIS and a little bit of a better readout speed, and slashed the X-T3 price in half, and it's stayed there ever since. Now, I have shot everything from music videos, documentaries, short films, brand campaigns, restaurant commercials, YouTube videos, event recaps, car edits, and portraits, all the way from Brooklyn to Cabo with zero issues. This camera has never overheated on me, it has never froze up on me, and I've shot from 115 degrees to 15 degrees. Reliable is an understatement. The X-T3 is the hybrid camera from top to bottom, left to right, front to back. As any good tool does, this camera allows you to take full control over it, and it does discipline you if you don't know what you're doing, which is why it helps you get better. Now, obviously the picture this thing makes, either motion or still, is just amazing. It fucks. Like every 4K camera nowadays, a lot of people will say that it looks too sharp or too digital, but it's because you're shooting 4K, so there's lots of ways to work around that. Either using some vintage lenses like I do, or using Dehancer. Use my code. Some good color grading know-how will allow you to get either a vintage filmic, really artsy look out of this camera, or if you want a really clean corporate style image, this camera can do it too. Now, I have heard complaints about some of the automatic settings, but this isn't a camera you want to be using automatically anyway. And I'll be honest, the only thing that I've ever used automatic would have been the ISO, and even that, it performs just fine. So I have no complaints there. Secondly, this is a reliable learning tool. Absolutely anything that this camera teaches you will translate over to any other camera body that you pick up in your career. Now, due to the versatility of this camera that I mentioned, you can put it through any genre of filmmaking or photography and know that it can confidently handle it. And that's what a camera should do. Now, I could go on all day about how much I love this camera and the Fujifilm brand, but I'm gonna cap it at 3. My final reason is just gonna be how cheap and budget friendly the ecosystem is. Whether you're looking for a battery or a lens, it also takes SD cards instead of CF Express, so that saves you a lot of money. And then just due to the age of this camera specifically, anything X-T3 related is so old that it's just dirt cheap. Battery grips, gauges, anything. Super cheap. I will say the one thing is that I had a really hard time finding a name brand X-T3 specific cage. Took me years of owning this camera before I finally found one on eBay. Got literally the last small rig cage that this thing probably had on the market, and the only ones that you can find are cheap knockoff ones. They're like 20 bucks. They get the job done, but there's also universal cages. So if that's a big problem for you, which it was for me, it was getting to a point where I was considering just upgrading to an X-T4 because there's a lot more availability because they're newer, only by 2 years, but there's a lot more aftermarket stuff for them. And the film community absolutely loves the X mount just because the Fujifilm simulations are great. So people love adapting vintage lenses onto these cameras, and you can find an adapter for just about any lens. And with doing so, you get a unique look that absolutely nobody can recreate. Me specifically, I'm using a medium format Mamiya 24mm fisheye lens. That's what you're looking at right now. Absolutely nobody is getting a look like this, and I can tell you I'm the only one shooting with this setup. But even if you went with new X-mount lenses, the glass is super affordable, and even if it looks super sharp, just throw a Pro Mist filter or some dehancer and you're good, honestly. Now, like anything great, it has its flaws, but the ones that I have encountered are fairly negatable, especially if you start picking up the inevitable accessories as you start progressing through your career. It's really not a problem whatsoever. Firstly, the 22 millisecond readout speed can be problematic if you're shooting sports or something that's super fast paced, but I shoot music, I've shot in events, it's really never been a problem. I've encountered it maybe once or twice where I've had to scrap the clip, it just wasn't usable. Secondly, battery life is something to be mindful of. It's not that the batteries are bad by any means, it's just that this model of camera specifically has an issue where if the battery dies all the way, then the internal battery starts failing and it factory resets everything. So the last thing you want to have to do is reset all of your settings on set with your client standing there waiting for you to figure everything out. Takes you a few minutes, trust me, it's happened to me once or twice. I've learned my lesson and I plan on getting external power anyway, so it's really not too big of a deal for me. Third, the lack of IBIS does require handheld work to be a little bit more intentional, which I think is okay anyway, it's how it should be. For photos, it's just fine. I shoot film 35mm anyway, so going anything lower than 1/60 needs a tripod for me. So I have shaky hands. I don't do anything under 160, but I've gotten a few shots 1/30 that perfectly clean. So, I mean, it does its job, but my camera setup's also a little bit heavier than most, so take that for what it is. And personally, I just think digital stabilization looks like shit anyways. If you're using it in camera or in lens, you could get away with just adding more weight to your rig. I personally think from a filmmaking standpoint, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And trained eyes, no. Honorable mention, the low light is mid at best, but I think that's perfectly fine for me. I like my images to be a little bit darker, a little bit more contrasty anyway, so it allows me to keep lower in the ISO ranges without having too much of my image already exposed. So like for instance with this, I can just bring in a light and show exactly what I want to show and exclude what I don't want to. Now we're going to do a little bit of a spec comparison, and personally I tend to overlook specs. I don't think they're the biggest thing in the world. I care more about the final image that it puts out and any kind of ergonomic issues that I might encounter. So really take this for what it is. But here are the only other cameras capable of shooting these specs and even a remotely similar price range. Now for other APS-C bodies, we have the FX30 and the Sony a6700. Both of these well over $1,000, and they're Sony sensors. I hate Sony sensors. Now there is the Canon R7 and the new Fuji XS20. I believe I'm saying that right. Now, once you get to full frame, you have the Sony ZV-E1, I believe that is, the Lumix S5, the Canon R6, and the Canon R8. And then we're back to Sony with the A7 IV and the FX3. I mean, all of these cameras are able to shoot 4K 60, but pretty much nothing else I've been able to find can shoot 4K 60 and other specs that this X-T3 is capable of. So these are really your only options, and all of those are well over $1,000, almost twice as much as the X-T3, and you are not getting twice the camera. Now for Micro Four Thirds, there is the GH5, which I'm a little ignorant about, so I would recommend watching Jake Hayden's video. He seems very well versed with that camera, but something to maybe consider. It has its own flaws that kind of rub me a little bit the wrong way, but that looks like a great alternative to the X-T3. Now, wrapping things up, I truly believe that this is a camera that any filmmaker or photographer can get at absolutely any point in their career and truly see value from it. Now, it's small enough to be thrown around on cheap tripods, but you can also kit it out and really add some weight to it for good handheld footage. The image that this camera is capable of is just incredible, and the few drawbacks that it does have are just tiny hurdles for anyone that really does know what they're doing. Even if you don't yet, this camera is something that's going to teach you what you're doing. Other cameras capable of these same specs are nearly twice the price of this Fuji X-T3, and in combination with the dials on top, the Fuji menu system, if you're a beginner, this camera is super easy to learn the ropes with. Now, because of X-mount vast majority of adapters for vintage lenses, you get unique looks for a fraction of the price that nobody else is getting. It's insanely versatile from photo to video. You can do anything from corporate to artsy stuff with a breeze. All the way from socials to big screens, this camera really does belong in the top 3, if not the top 5 conversation, but I guarantee it'll never reach that. I will say the app is pretty ass when it does decide to work, but I can count on half a hand how many times I've actually had to use the app, so if that's a deal breaker for you, then so be it. As a beginner, you do not need to go 6K, you do not need full frame, you do not need IBIS. I've been in this for almost 10 years and I don't want any of those things. I promise you don't need them if you figure out what you're actually doing. Some time, learn from the greats of the past and the present, figure out what you want to actually do, and just study it. Learn the ins and outs of the process. Experiment. Spend the few $100, get a cheap camera, get a cheap vintage lens off of eBay or your local thrift shop, buy an adapter for 20 bucks online, and figure out how to make good images with that. Whether you're doing photo, watch Ted Forbes, The Art of Photography. He's got a great playlist, definitely recommend watching that. And then for video cinematography stuff, I recommend The Wandering DP, both two huge catalogs of content they can go through and watch for days on end. So can't recommend them enough. And then when it comes to camera stuff, just overall nerdy camera talk, Jake Hayden. Already said him once, I'll say him again. Can't recommend that dude enough. Unfortunately, he doesn't have any kind of social media to plug him, but he is on YouTube, so make sure you go check him out. Even with the factory resets, a broken LCD screen, and everybody under the sun saying Sony this, Sony that, I don't plan on upgrading anytime soon. Regardless, if this camera dies out, I'm getting another X-T3. At most of an upgrade, I'm going with an X-T4, so I've got better readout speed and more cage accessibility. But other than that, X-T3 all day. Unless Fuji wants to send me something out to review and give a shot, I have no plans and no need to upgrade. I mean, this is a great image. This took me 2 minutes to set up. Come on now. And I'd just like to thank you so much for stopping by. This video took me a little bit of time just because I have used this camera for so long. I have so many thoughts about it. I just had to try and consolidate everything as best as I could. So if you took anything from this video, I really hope it's that this is a slept on camera. This thing is a workhorse. It'll get you from point A to point B in your career, and it'll teach you everything you need to know along the way. So check out Fujifilms. Even if it's not an X-T3, they probably got something great for you. So I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Make sure you follow me on Instagram at John Narvel. Put that on screen here. Stay safe.